So here's something strange. Brand new data that just released today shows that the PlayStation 5 actually outsold Nintendo's brand new Switch 2 last quarter. Let's jump right in here. Sony is stockpiling memory as the 5-year-old PlayStation 5 outsells the Switch 2. The PlayStation 5 is getting pretty old, but it's still selling surprisingly well. In fact, it outsold the Switch 2 last quarter even without the help of Grand Theft Auto 6. And by the way, we are definitely going to talk about Grand Theft Auto 6 later in the video, but the article goes on to say Sony told investors during its latest earnings call that it's stockpiling memory amid a computing component shortage to try to repeat that holiday sales success in 2026. What was that sales success? Well, the PS5 outsold the Switch 2. I feel like a lot of people didn't really expect this. I mean, we saw the November data in the United States show that the PS5 was far outselling the Switch 2, but after December's data came out, I feel like everybody kind of thought like, okay, well, the Switch 2 surely with all the retail price drops was going to make up for it and it's going to outsell the PS5 in that quarter, but it turns out that it didn't. The article goes on to say, as Nintendo reported earlier this week, the Switch 2 sold 7 million units last quarter. Sony just confirmed that the PS5 sold 8 million. That is wild to think about, especially because it's not like the PS5 fall lineup was unusually strong, and that's true, right? If we look at the holiday quarter, right, that is October, November, and December, and you got to remember that the Switch 2, this was its first holiday quarter, and it had Pokemon Legends ZA launch in October, so we know that a majority of the copies of that game were sold for the Switch 1, but even still, that definitely moved units. It sold over 3 million units on the Switch 2. And what did the PS5 have this holiday season? I wouldn't say there was any like super crazy games that came out. Now, it did have one big advantage that we will talk about later in the video, and it's something that I've actually mentioned here on the channel, and everyone seems to be just forgetting about this obvious reality of the PS5, so we'll discuss that later. But let's continue with the article here. They said Sony was, however, the only console maker to steeply discount its hardware across the US and Europe for the holiday. That's actually wrong. I'm kind of surprised that Kotaku would write this when that's just objectively not true. I mean, yes, technically there was a price drop, but let's just check the facts here for a second. The PS5 came out in November of 2020 and it was priced at $500 for the standard or $400 for the digital edition. So Kotaku says they had a steep discount for the PS5, but then goes on to say that it was $400 for the digital edition, which is the price of the digital edition at launch. So basically they raised the price this year and then just lowered it back to what it was. So somehow that is a steep discount. I'm not really sure there. In fact, the crazier part of the sentence is actually the last half, saying that it was cheaper than the Switch 2, which is again true at some retailers, but definitely not true at others. Over the entirety of December, we covered here on the channel that so many retailers in the US had significant price drops on the Switch 2. A lot of those were the bundled version, but even at Micro Center, you could get the Switch 2 base model for $399, which is the same price as the PS5. So I think when you look at the PS5 outselling Switch 2 and you say, oh well, it's because the PS5 was cheaper, it's like actually objectively it wasn't. I mean, they're really neck and neck in the same price bracket. I don't know how you could make that argument. Maybe in Europe, right? Maybe in other countries that's the case, I don't know, but I'm really not sure where they're getting this information from, or maybe they just didn't really pay attention to how prices actually played out over the holiday season. But the fact that PS5 beat the Switch 2 by 1 million units is kind of insane. Right now they do go on to say that, hey, the Switch 1 was still being sold as well, which is like, I think it's kind of silly that a lot of these outlets keep like bending over backwards to make sure Nintendo looks really good, right? Like, okay, well, if we're gonna add in the numbers of last generation too, like, all right, well, the PS4 sold over 117 million units, so why don't we just add the PS4 and PS5 and then just compare that to the Switch 1 and Switch 2? It's like, oh well, that's not fair. It's like, yeah, exactly, that's the point. Like, why are we adding old generation stuff? It doesn't make any sense to do that. But either way, the 5-year-old PS5 outsold the brand new Nintendo Switch 2, even when both of those consoles were getting comparable discounts over the holiday season. It's kind of insane, especially when the gap is 1 million units and you factor in how successful the Switch 2 was in Japan. If you watched my latest video, you'll know that the Switch 2 actually sold more units in Japan last quarter than it did in the Americas, which is mind-blowing considering the fact that the Americas have way more people interested in buying game consoles, and I think maybe that has to do with the fact that the Switch 2 is way cheaper. It's not $50 cheaper, it's like $120 cheaper over in Japan, so that definitely plays a factor. Now let's go on to what Sony actually said here. This is a quote: "As for securing a supply of memory, we are already in a position to secure the minimum quantity necessary to manage the year-end selling season of next fiscal year," Sony CFO Lin Tao said on the call. Quote, "Going forward, we intend to further negotiate with various suppliers to secure enough supply to meet the demand of our customers. Given the stage of our console cycle, our hardware sales strategy can be adjusted flexibly, and we intend to minimize the impact of the increased memory cost on this segment going forward by prioritizing monetization of the install base to date and striving to further expand our software and network service revenue." So expanding software and network service revenue. So it sounds like maybe they're going to offset, like, you know, obviously the price of memory is going up, right? Or it's already high, and so like they have to deal with that, and they can offset that cost by increasing revenue from network services and software. So are they going to increase the price of their games? Are they going to increase the price of PlayStation Network? Who knows what they're going to do in this coming year, but they are definitely at scale after 5 years of the PS5 being on market, which is a huge advantage that they have over the Switch 2, which is still in its early stages and trying to get as big of an install base as possible. They definitely have more flexibility with the PS5. Reading between the lines, it sounds like Sony will do its best to manage the current cost of the console so it doesn't have to raise prices again, and will instead make up any lost profit margins by finding even more ways to get its most loyal PlayStation fans to hand over their money. That has, in a nutshell, been the company's strategy this entire generation. Here's what else we learned. Now, this is actually a very different strategy than Nintendo is taking when they're looking at the memory market. We're going to touch on that in just a minute because it's actually a very big difference. And just for a little bit of foreshadowing, the price of the Switch 2 looks like it might be going up in 2026. We'll talk about that in a minute, but we already talked about the PS5 outselling Switch 2. Ghost of Yotei is selling better than Ghost of Tsushima. Sony's latest blockbuster exclusive has been at the center of a culture war in some corners of the internet, but that doesn't seem to have hurt sales at all. Apparently it sold 3.3 million copies as of last November and was one of the top downloaded games on PS5 the whole year. And here's another crazy statistic that when you compare it to Nintendo, it really does look like PlayStation is simply ahead of the game here, because PlayStation users just hit a new record peak. Sony recorded 132 million active PlayStation accounts last quarter, up 2% from December of 2024. Total playtime was also up 0.4% for the period. Since we know Sony has sold only 92 million PS5 units so far, that suggests that a surprising number of people are still playing on PS4, which honestly isn't surprising either, because you look at what games are people playing. They're still playing Call of Duty, they're still playing Fortnite, and you could play that on PS4, so why not? And the reason that I said it looks like PlayStation is simply ahead of Nintendo at this point is because their active users are growing, whereas Nintendo's active users are actually declining. I showed this off in my last video, but in case you guys didn't see it, this is from Nintendo's financial report that they just released this week, and it shows that annual playing players actually went down from 130 million to 129 million, and like frankly that's less than a 1% drop, but at best you can say that this is stagnation since 2023, right? I mean, really, that's for being honest, that's what this looks like. It looks like stagnation since 2023, but PlayStation grew last quarter straight up, and the number's bigger. I mean, 132 million active players last quarter compared to Nintendo's 129 million active players. And yes, this graph does include Switch 2 players, right? They actually clarify that in this note right here. They say the number of annual players refers to the number of Nintendo accounts out of all Nintendo accounts registered to a Switch or Switch 2 system that use the Switch or Switch 2 software one or more times in a 12-month period. Okay, so really, I mean, the data is just the data. There's more active players on PlayStation, and the PS5 outsold the Switch 2 last holiday season. But what does that mean going into 2026? Well, we need to talk about memory shortage, and we also have to talk about games, because as I said earlier, today's Nintendo Direct is kind of, I mean, I don't know, to me it seems like a little bit of a miss. We'll talk about that, but also the games that you can play on PS5 this year, kind of insane, and those things going head to head in 2026, it's going to be a really interesting year. But let's start with the memory shortage here, because this was just posted on CNBC. PlayStation maker Sony overcomes memory crunch to post 22% jump in profits. Sony beat profit estimates and raised its full year outlook. Game revenue slipped as console hardware sales slowed, and raising DRAM prices pose a risk to hardware margins. So Sony's December quarter results compared to LSEG estimates, which is what we talked about in last video for the Switch 2, so this is apples to apples right here. Their revenue revenue was 3.71 trillion Japanese yen versus the 3.69 trillion yen expected, and operating profit was 515 billion versus 468.9 billion yen expected. Operating profit jumped and revenue was up just 1%. So overall, Sony had a solid quarter, and they were already stockpiling memory to make sure that they have enough PS5s to sell throughout 2026, because they do have a huge game coming. We will talk about that, but now let's compare that to what the Nintendo strategy is going into 2026. Nintendo president says increasing memory costs won't affect Switch 2 price for now, but if it continues, it will re-evaluate. So this is a very different strategy, right? Because what we see here is that the PS5 actually already increased their price in 2025, but was able to not sell it at that price for last holiday. So further price increases may not be necessary, especially because we covered that, you know, they can make more money from their subscription service or their software or things like that. But the Switch 2, being so new on the market, is way more sensitive to a price increase in 2026. So as I've said time and time again, Nintendo is kind of between a rock and a hard place when it comes to the price of the Switch 2, because we know their component price is going to go up. This will probably continue throughout 2026, but because they need to expand their install base, it's going to make it really hard for them to justify a price increase of the Switch 2, whereas the PS5 can just stay the price that it currently is, right? That price hike was already baked in, you know, however many, 6 to 9 months ago. I don't even remember now, but this information comes from the recent Q&A session following Nintendo's latest financial call. One shareholder asked Furukawa whether there was a possibility of Nintendo revising the price of Switch 2 hardware if the price of components continues to increase. Furukawa replied that while Nintendo doesn't discuss specific components in detail, it was having discussions with its suppliers to ensure a stable supply in the long term. As a result, Furukawa says the recent surge in memory prices didn't significantly impact on its hardware profitability during the third quarter, so that was October to December of last year, and he doesn't expect a significant impact in the fourth quarter either, so that means January through March. Okay, we're already almost halfway through that period. He did note, however, that should the surge in prices continue into the next financial year and beyond, April, May, and June of this year, this could eventually have an impact on profitability, and that should the situation deteriorate significantly, the company will assess the market and take appropriate measures. Furukawa stressed that no decisions have currently been made to change the price of Switch 2, and pointed out that something as important as a price increase would have to take more than just one factor into account before it's decided upon. And he said price changes will be determined comprehensively, taking into account not only profitability but also the adoption of the platform, sales trends, and market conditions. So again, Sony has a massive advantage here because the PS5 is already 5 years old, it's already at scale, and they've already raised their price, so they don't have to do anything else. So when we go into holiday of 2026, let's just say that memory prices are going to continue to be high. Okay, I think that's a fair assessment. We don't know, but maybe. Then okay, so the PS5 can't afford a price reduction this holiday. That's fine, it's going to sit at its current price point. And the Switch 2, well, they're not going to have as much room to do the price reductions that the retailers did last year, so they're either going to maintain their price of 450 or 500, or maybe even increase the price. And if that's the case, these are going to be in the same price bracket, right? We've got a $500 PlayStation 5 and a $550 1 terabyte with disk drive. It's also been rumored that a middle ground approach, I think Nico Partners, actually the analysts over there, said this, but they said they wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo actually just got rid of the base model for 450 and only sold the $500 model bundled with a game. And so if that's the case, then again, we're going to find ourselves in holiday of 2026 where these consoles are probably going to be in the same price bracket again. And if these consoles are priced competitively in the same range going into 2026, there might continue to be a much bigger reason to buy a PS5 over the Switch 2. Why is that? Well, as everybody knows, GTA 6 is coming out this year, allegedly. It could get pushed back, and that is a big factor when it comes to how well the PS5 is going to do this year, right? If GTA 6 comes out this year, they're going to have a massive advantage going into holiday of 2026. If it gets delayed again, however, I feel like they're going to be crushed. I feel like PS5 is not going to stand a chance this year, but we'll have to wait and see. This article says GTA 6 could be the catalyst for a huge console gaming jump amid increasing RAM prices. History says one thing clearly: GTA moves hardware, not just copies. Very few video game franchises can credibly claim to move hardware, and none more so than GTA 5. GTA 6's current status as a console first release is arguably the most immediate and powerful accelerant behind its hardware shifting potential. Whether Rockstar ultimately brings the game to PC a year later is almost beside the point. Exactly. I mean, there is so much hype around GTA 6 that a lot of people, even if they are primarily PC gamers, I think a lot of people are not going to want to wait a year. They're going to want to just play Grand Theft Auto 6 as soon as they possibly can. And what console are they going to buy if GTA 6 comes out this year? Is it going to be the Switch 2? No, it's not. It's not announced for the Switch 2, and maybe it could come to the Switch 2, but I highly doubt it, at least not at launch, right? And then we think about, okay, well, it's not going to be on PC either, so really the only choices are the PlayStation 5 and Xbox. And as we see from the past few quarterly results from Microsoft, Xbox sales are through the floor. I mean, they have completely collapsed. It's not even close. The PlayStation 5 is positioned to be basically the sole beneficiary of the Grand Theft Auto 6 launch. Like, that is going to be the console everyone buys, not only because it's kind of the only man standing, but also because the PS5 vastly outsold the Xbox, and that's where everyone's going to be playing. And I know that it's going to be cross-platform, but I mean, really, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to come to the conclusion that the more popular of the two consoles, where everyone already has friends on that console, is going to be the one that most people gravitate towards to play the highly anticipated Grand Theft Auto 6, right? So when you compare the hype of GTA 6 and how good it will be for the PS5 if it comes out this year, right? And that's a big if, because there's been so many delays. Then we have to compare that to what was just announced for the Nintendo Switch 2 at their partner showcase this morning. Switch 2 owners are getting a lot of ports in 2026. That's right, folks. This was another direct where we're just seeing a lot of old games come to the Switch 2. And like, look, that's great for people that haven't played them yet. We're talking about Bethesda games, right? Oblivion and Fallout 4. These are PlayStation 4 games. Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. That's going to be good, right? Obviously, we just saw Final Fantasy 7 sell really well on the Switch 2, what, like a week or two ago? And we've got other games like Adventures of Elliot, which that's going to release on multiple platforms. We have Monster Hunter Stories 3 Twisted Reflection. That's going to release on multiple platforms. Resident Evil, that's coming to multiple platforms. We've got Bomberman Collection. We've got Tokyo Scramble. Valheim, that's been out for a really long time. Hollow Knight, that's already been out. Digimon Story Time Stranger, that's already out on PS5. Like, there's so many games here where it's like, you know, are these good, solid games? Absolutely, right? All of these games have a market. All of these games have an audience, but the reality is, like, how many people are going to buy a Switch 2 for Turok Origins, right? How many people are going to buy a Switch 2 to play Oblivion again? Maybe, right? Maybe they will. I mean, Oblivion is a great game. I beat it on PS3. I played a bit of it on PS5 for the remastered version, but like, do I want to play it again on the Switch 2 just because it's portable? Like, maybe. I mean, there's tons of replayability here, but again, like, you compare this partner showcase and this lineup, even if you only compare it to GTA 6, like, I mean, what are we talking about here? Like, I think GTA 6 is going to outsell all these Switch 2 editions combined, probably, right? I mean, maybe not, but like, I don't know. Like, this partner direct, like, we knew going into this it was going to be all third parties, right? And a lot of this stuff is going to be game key cards, which already leaves players with a sour taste in their mouth. But you look at this partner direct and it's like, I don't personally, and you know, I can only speak for myself, but if I don't have a Switch 2 right now, I'm not looking at this and saying, okay, yeah, now I'm gonna jump in, right? Yes, finally I'm gonna be able to play Bomberman Collection, right? Like, especially this is already on Switch, right? It's coming to Switch as well, so I'm sure some of these games are going to move units, but I just, nothing here is even close to Grand Theft Auto, right? And that's not even to factor in the major point that I've actually been talking about on the channel before, and that was shared by, again, Matt Piscatella. This is Circana's player engagement tracker. That he does this, I believe, weekly, monthly, and possibly even yearly. But let's just look at the most popular games people are playing right now. Okay, look at PlayStation and Xbox. There's a lot of overlap here. Okay, so I'm just going to refer to the PlayStation side, but Fortnite, okay, that's on Switch 2. Call of Duty, that is not on Switch 2. Grand Theft Auto, that is not on Switch 2. Roblox, that is not on Switch 2. Marvel Rivals, that is not on Switch 2. Arc Raiders, that is not on Switch 2. So 4 out of the top 6 games that people are playing right now are not on the Switch 2, and they weren't announced for today's partner direct, right? We didn't hear anything about Call of Duty. We didn't hear anything about Roblox. We didn't hear anything about even the last Grand Theft Auto coming to the Switch 2, much less Grand Theft Auto 6, right? These are massive games. This is what people are playing, right? What a lot of modern gamers do, I don't know if you guys know this, but what happens is a big game comes out, they play that big game. We're talking about things like Elden Ring or like Expedition 33 or whatever, right? Like, they play that big game, and then then once they're done with that game, they go back to the games that they play with their friends. And what are those games? Fortnite, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, Roblox. Maybe some of you are playing Marvel Rivals, right? That's kind of the modern gamer's behavior. They only play a couple of exclusive games every year, but they return to the big live service games, and that's just a giant hole in the Switch 2 market. Like, most of those games you cannot play on Switch 2. Now, luckily for Switch 2, they do have Fortnite. That is the #1 title, but besides that, it's just going to lose in the live service market every single time to the PlayStation 5. So again, we look at holiday of 2026, assuming that these consoles are still in the same price bracket and GTA 6 comes out. It's like, okay, well, am I gonna get the Switch 2 and play Resident Evil Requiem? Or, oh wait, actually I can get a PS5 and play that game, and by the way, the PS5 is more powerful than the Switch 2, so I can still play that game, and I can play all the live service stuff that's on there with my friends that already have a PS5, and I can play Grand Theft Auto 6. It's like, it's a no-brainer for your average consumer, right? It really is. And this just comes down to value proposition. It's not that the PS5 is objectively better than the Switch 2, it's just, again, a value proposition. Do you get the console that is less powerful with fewer games, or do you get the console that all of your friends are already playing that has all the games that you're already playing as well? Now, of course, this changes if Nintendo releases a 3D Mario or a new Zelda or Smash Brothers or some massive title that's going to pull a bunch of people in. But so far, the Switch 2 titles from Nintendo, I mean, really, we're looking at Fire Emblem and Splatoon, right? Like, those are the big console movers, unless Pokemon Pokopia is some like dark horse that no one expects is going to sell Animal Crossing numbers. Maybe it will, but Mario Wonder, like, yeah, that might move some units, and the Mario movie is going to move some units, but like Yoshi and the Mysterious Book is going to be like, I mean, at best, that's going to be Donkey Kong Bonanza level of sales, which honestly, I think that's being generous. I think it might even be a little bit worse than that, unless this is a huge beneficiary of the success of the Mario movie, because as we know, so Yoshi is in that movie. Maybe that's the case, right? So then it's like Fire Emblem. Okay, well, yeah, Fire Emblem is a great franchise, but it is a little bit niche. I know it's popular, but it's not, this isn't Call of Duty, right? This isn't Grand Theft Auto. This isn't even a 3D Mario, you know what I mean? Then we've got Splatoon, which a lot of people did get a Switch for Splatoon, so that's going to be possibly a big game, right? But like, again, I just don't see these games that we see already announced competing with what is going to be available for the PS5 at the end of the year, even if the only thing that they get is Grand Theft Auto 6, right? Now, that's not to say that Nintendo won't actually announce more things. Of course, they're probably going to announce more things, and for their sake, I hope they do, but things are looking really tough for the Switch 2 right now going into 2026. And I think, you know, of course, objectively, 2025 was very successful for the Switch 2, right? We already knew that. What a lot of people are looking at is the trajectory of the Switch 2, and everyone's kind of left scratching their head like, okay, well, what do we play? Like, what is next? Like, I feel like there's a lot of hype and a lot of early adopters, but it's like, you know, the average consumer is still waiting on the sidelines for what they're supposed to be playing on the Switch 2. And just to throw this in at the end here, one little last point to touch on is that we do also have the Valve Steam Machine coming out in the first half of this year, right? And I think this is more so a competitor to the PS5 rather than the Switch 2, but again, it comes down to value proposition, and frankly, there is going to be a very core player base that is going to get the Steam Machine, and whether Nintendo's lawyers like it or not, they might even play some Nintendo games on here, you know what I mean? And it's going to play better than on official hardware. So let's see what this says. Valve is revisiting Steam Machine pricing and release timing due to rapidly increasing memory and storage shortages. Our goal of shipping all three products in the first half of the year has not changed, but we have work to do to land on concrete pricing and launch date. In a new update, Valve says it initially planned to reveal pricing and release timing details by now, but the ongoing and unprecedented memory chip shortage, made worse by a surge in demand from AI data centers, according to the Internal Data Corporation, threw a wrench in those plans. Quote, the memory and storage shortages you've likely heard about across the industry have rapidly increased since the announcement, Valve says. The limited availability and growing prices of these critical components mean we must revisit our exact shipping schedule and pricing. Valve notes that this pertains especially to the Steam Machine and Steam Frame, Valve's new VR headset. So if Valve's Steam Machine comes in at a much higher price than consumers are willing to pay, then that could also be another point in the favor of PS5. And like, look, I don't want to come off as a PS5 fanboy here. frankly, if it weren't for Elden Ring that I played over this last holiday season, I wouldn't have really touched my PS5 that much last year. I really have no skin in the game, but like just objectively, it looks like a lot of good things are lining up for the PS5, but all of it hinges on their ability to, one, have enough memory stockpiled for when demand spikes, and two, if GTA 6 actually comes out this year. Those are the big factors that will affect the PS5's success this year, and if it can nail both of those things, I think it's going to put a ton of pressure on the Switch 2. But if they can't, I think the Switch 2 will be the default choice for consumers in 2026, simply because it is the latest thing on the market. Again, the PS5, it is 5 years old, okay? So a lot of people already have it. They don't have a Switch 2, and if there's no reason to pick up a PS5 this year, they might as well get the thing that's portable, the latest thing on the block, and then they can play some of Nintendo's exclusives. But guys, if you made it to the end of this video, consider dropping a thumbs up on it. It really does help out the channel way more than you think, and you guys might think you're subscribed because you've seen a ton of my content, but you're actually not. Double check down below.